All right, well, you asked for it. You asked for it. Why did I write this book? If you have the book, I'm going to ask you to turn to page numbers, because I was careful with the language, and I think I can read from the text in such a way that you won't get bored. Generally, that's a death for an audience, but I don't think it will be the case here. I'm not going to read the entire introduction. It's going to be what we focus on today, unless I'm inspired and we go really fast. But why did I write this book? By the way, one of the reasons, I'm going to move away from the book for a moment. One of the reasons why I wrote the book was I wanted to write a book that someone who had been a believer for a long time, Chuck, might get something out of and enjoy, or Glenn, or Rob Lodge. But I also wanted to write a book where someone's got a daughter or a son, and they've kind of given up on following Jesus. And I had them in mind as I was writing the book. Do not be hesitant to get this book for a daughter or a son who might have become an atheist or an agnostic. I wrote it with them in the back of my mind. I'm going to just read a little bit here on the beginning. For those, this is on page 1. Good place to start. For those seeking an explanation for how we got into this situation, a situation which I describe in the first paragraph, this is not that book. Instead, this is my invitation to readers, whether Christian or not, whether church attenders or not, to recenter how we understand what it means to be a Christian in the way it was originally meant. My hope is not merely to provide a Catholic or Protestant or Orthodox interpretation, but one most Christians through the centuries would affirm. Jesus offers us the ability to live a different way. This is not different just to stand out, but different in a way that fills us with longing, a sense of goodness and joy with a deep resonance within us, that this is how things were meant to be. Following this way should be the foundation for what it means to be a Christian. This book is for those who haven't foreclosed on God's existence, even though they may be skeptical that reliable knowledge of God is possible. Or for folks who have not left the Christian faith behind, but sense that their lives with Jesus are misaligned or decentered. Ever feel like that? Misaligned or decentered. I'm offering these seekers an opportunity to recenter their journey with Jesus. So this theme of a journey with Jesus on a different way flows right through the book, from the intro to the very last paragraph of the book. It's also for Christian folks who sense a gap between their words about Jesus and the reality of their lives. Ever feel like that? As one mentor expressed to me, the gold of our lives too often fails to support the currency of our words. These believers long for greater congruence between their words and actions. They long for their lives to ring true, not tinny. Don't you like to meet people like that? You sense this is a real person. And somehow their words and their actions are fitting together, that their life is congruent. these folks want to walk more faithfully in Jesus' footsteps. So this idea of walking faithfully in Jesus' footsteps is going to run right through the book, because we're going to be walking with Jesus on a different way. He's going to be offering his shoes to us, in a manner of speaking. They want to get back on track. So this book may serve as a reminder of what we do, why we do it, and what we should be about. Considering a different way with Jesus may involve significant changes in how we act or understand God, ourselves, or the world. Recentering may make us feel uncomfortable as the terrain of our world shifts. Yet taking a new journey, walking a new path, can also be exhilarating. Remember the last time you headed out on the road? Maybe when you were a little bit younger? Back in the 60s, we used to do that, and it was a good thing. The quest to discover new lands has motivated, indeed driven, human explorers across thousands of years. Interior landscapes offer themselves, interior landscapes. Think about ponder with me, the interior landscape of your life. A garden, a desert, mountain range. What does it look like? So in a different way, I invite you to navigate your life with Jesus as your guide. A way I have found meaningful and compelling over the multiple decades I have been traveling this path. My hope is to provide a roadmap for you to take such a journey. This is a roadmap. That's what a roadmap, marking out the path that I believe he might have us follow. You know, and we only get so many years. I have a chapter where I talk about traveling with Jesus in our gift of years. We only get so many. I'm in the back stretch. I don't know why I just looked at Chuck. I'm in the back stretch.
No, that's one.
You know, the red light is blinking. I have a doctor friend in Canada. He and I have known each other for years. And I was complaining a little bit about getting older, and then I said, oh, but you know what? 60 is the new 40. He laughed, and he said, oh no, when you turn 60, the red light starts blinking. Which was a good word. It's every once in a while it's a good word. Like, sometimes in this book, you'll feel like I just throw a bucket of water in your face. That's all right. Because sometimes, you know, we can lose our mind spiritually. And we need to get recentered again. So this book, I'm thinking of those sons and daughters now at this point. This book offers you something worth considering. What's the worst thing that could happen? You spend a few hours with Jesus, the greatest teacher in human history. Your knowledge of his teaching and life deepens, and you continue on your way. Perhaps, though, by spending time with Jesus on a different way will open up to you. Picture a door swinging open that you had imagined forever locked. Ever feel like that? A door swinging open you had imagined forever locked. A portal into a more fulfilling, flourishing life. This book may provide the key. Why foreclose on that possibility? I'm talking to the atheists, the agnostics, and the reading audience especially. The vast panoply of human tragedy sometimes overwhelms us. I'll talk about tragedy and pain fairly often in the book. A different way with Jesus doesn't ignore that side of life. we learn to navigate it well when those times come. So I say, yet isn't one last pondering of Jesus' teaching worth the effort? And effort will be involved. So much hangs in the balance. And then I talk a little bit about these reflection questions. So for example, turn to the end of the introduction. Now do you see the gray boxes? So throughout the book, there are these gray boxes. And you're reading along, and you'll get to a gray box, and you think, I'll do that later. Don't do that. No, take your time. Take your time. We might even take a look at that gray box at the end of the intro in just a moment. So what's the thematic roadmap to this book? I think we'll learn to reorient ourselves by asking a series of key questions. Now, just listen. If you don't have the book, just listen to the questions. If you do have the book, follow along. I'm on page 4. I think these are absolutely essential to ponder, work through, discuss, and so on, to stay sane spiritually, to remain open to the power of the Holy Spirit in our lives. Verse 1, what's God like? I know you're thinking, well, I think God's like this, or I'm not so happy about what I think God is like. So we have to work on that. What's God like? What does it mean to be God's precious image bearer? Now, I use this phrase, God's precious image bearer, because about 8 years ago or so, I just started to use the word image bearer for human being. And people seem to be so helped by that. A human being is God's image bearer. Not only God's image bearer, God's precious image bearer. So I use that all the time in this book. Why did God create us with bodies? He didn't have to, you know. Why did God create us with bodies, which are so interesting, particularly as we grow older? I find myself gazing in the mirror oftentimes now. I feel about 25 inside, and I'm 73 and counting outside. What does it mean? Tuck this phrase away. What does it mean to be an embodied self? An embodied self. Does God love us? Now, you ask that question in front of a group, and everybody's thinking, well, yeah, sure. They might be thinking that that's the right answer. But oftentimes in a precious image bearer's heart, she's not convinced. He's not convinced that God could love somebody like me. Somebody with my history. Oh, Chris, if you knew my history, you'd think again to write like that. Well, this is one of the reasons why I share my history a little bit in this book. Maybe that'll help a bit. What does God desire for us as we live through our gift of years? I want you to ponder that phrase, gift of years, with me. God's given each one of us a gift of years. It's a pure gift. It's a pure gift. We now have in our family, I have a little grandson named Shane, a little Downs baby. And God's given Shane a gift of years. I don't know how long. But a gift of years he's giving to this little baby. And I've got a son over in Taiwan who's now 43. God's given him 43 years. How God distributes these years is a mystery to me, but they're a gift. What is God offering us? Let me personalize. What is God offering me? What is God offering you in your gift of years? What is God offering? What's God asking of you or of me? There have been times in my life when I have said, Lord, you can't be asking this of me. You can't be asking me. Not this, Lord, or anything but this, Lord. Yep. And we'll have to work through that. How might a clear understanding of time and the time we inhabit in human history help us navigate our journey with Jesus? I have an entire chapter on how God has reordered time for the Christian. And I argue, I think it's the second chapter, if we don't get this right, the spiritual life won't make sense to us. But if we can get it right about the time in which we live, the nature of that time, I think things will clarify. What opposition can we expect to encounter as we travel with Jesus toward our true home? Oh, don't be naive. Classically, the phrase used hundreds of years, the world, the flesh, the devil. And so I've got an entire chapter with some stories tossed in to illustrate the nature of that opposition. And then in the second half of the book, we look at specific practices of Jesus that he practiced to keep spiritually healthy. Sound a little funny to say it like that? Jesus practiced stuff to stay spiritually healthy? Yes, because he's not only fully divine, but fully human. Fully human. So the one who inspired the scripture and in his divinity continues to know every word from beginning to end, attends synagogue as a 12-year-old and is learning the very book that he inspired and still knows in his divinity fully. Enough to make you think. So I'm going to move down a couple paragraphs here. Throughout a different way, I encourage you, this is my encouragement to you at the bottom of page 5. I encourage you to practice walking in step with Jesus at a pace neither faster than his nor slower than he desires. He wants to walk through our lives with us. We're his fellow pilgrims, traveling light, heading toward home. If we learn to walk in Jesus' footsteps, as demanding as and occasionally painful as the road may be, by God's grace, we'll reach the end of our journey smiling and in good shape. Wise travel with Jesus, though, requires willing attentiveness to him as our trustworthy guide and companion. In block letters, see the word attentiveness. I'll keep coming back to that in the book. Attentiveness. Even ask yourself the question, what have I been attending to, paying attention to in my life so far? How might he be asking greater attentiveness of me? It's almost like he's saying, oh, dear child, I have something I would like to show you. Yeah? Really? Yes, yes. You're my precious image bearer. I'm going to ask you, too, to attend to my words in my life very carefully. Surround that with the grace of God. Greater attentiveness. Sometimes the winds on our journey will blow hard, thunder will erupt, and clouds will descend. Ain't it true? Occasionally, we'll be tempted to yell, Lord, this can't possibly be the right direction. Yet if we trust in our own personal GPS, sooner or later, it will lead us into trouble. We'll swerve off course and predictably run into what I call roadside misery markers. They hurt. I write about these markers quite a bit in the last chapter. Roadside misery markers. Well, I want to talk a little bit about my Uncle Bob. What Jesus oftentimes gives us, both in the history of the church and the great saints of the church, everyday Christians like you and me, sometimes we're given beacon lights. Just imagine that in your mind's eye, a beacon light. Have you been in a relationship with someone or seen somebody and it's like they're shining a light and you are deeply attracted to that light? Well, Uncle Bob was like that for me. Now, this is something about me that you don't know. Those of you who know me, I don't think you know this part. And it's hard for me to read this because there was a period in my life, particularly, well, starting from about age 6 or 7 and going up to about age 20 or 21, when things were pretty rough for me and for people who came in contact with me. I thought it might be helpful to you to hear how I first discovered this different way. A troubling and sad aspect of my early life story was my attraction to violence and the dark side of life. This pull towards darkness began when I was around 6. I recall my mom's concern as she watched me draw airplanes. Most had swastikas on the vertical stabilizer. "Oh, honey, you don't want to draw those." But I did, 6 years of age. For some reason, I still can't fully explain the evil represented by the swastika resonated in my very young heart. As I grew older, the lure of darkness strengthened. Sometimes I did violent things. My actions were shameful. The memory of them still hurts. In my teens, I was increasingly drawn to violent movies. Horror films were especially appealing. My Uncle Bob, I smile whenever I start thinking about him. My Uncle Bob played a special role in my life during these troubling years. When I was with him, the draw to darkness receded and I felt more peaceful. I still have the New Testament he gave me when I entered UCLA at the age of 18. He could see I was a searching, frustrated, angry young man. God seemed distant, inaccessible, incomprehensible. Old ingrained habits constantly snapped at my heels. Ever feel like that even to this day? It was a discouraging, perplexing time for me. Many weekends, I would drive up the coast from LA to Uncle Bob and Aunt Ern's house in Portola Valley, sometimes showing up unexpectedly. Now, at this point in time, you have to imagine what I looked like. Oh, my goodness. I looked like Abby Hoffman. If you know who Abby Hoffman is. I had hair that just, and accompanying personality disorders with it. They always had a spare room for me. I'd hunker down with earphones clamped to my head, shutting out the world, listening to the Doors for hours on end. I did not find Jim Morrison to be extremely helpful in my spiritual development. I'd show up for meals and sometimes disrupted the peace by voicing my displeasure with God, Christians, and the world in general. If Christians really believe what they say is true, surely they'd be living differently. Jesus' life and teaching may be true. The lives of those who claim to follow him don't look like his. I pointed my finger at others, but in the recesses of my heart, I knew that my life was out of kilter, off balance, twisted, curved in on itself. In my more honest moments, I sensed that the cracks I so eagerly condemned in others' lives were more than matched by the crevices in my own soul. Uncle Bob listened patiently to my rants. He took my questions seriously. He was willing to argue with me, but in such a way I never felt attacked, demeaned, or condemned. I wonder if my uncle knew how closely I was watching him. People watch, you know. Kids watch. Uncle Bob was far from perfect, yet his life was attractive and compelling, even beautiful. As I pondered how he lived, Uncle Bob's beacon light beamed in Jesus' direction. That's what a beacon light does in a believer's life who's healthy spiritually. Beams in Jesus' direction. My uncle's generosity, love, and acceptance created in me a deep desire to find a different way. From that push, I eventually discovered that goodness and light were more appealing than evil and darkness. But it was a journey, not an instant change. That is why following Jesus is called a way and not just a destination. And the first step in deciding to embark on the way Jesus is, the first step is in deciding to embark on the way Jesus is inviting us to follow. I'll just toss that out the group. I sense that there's going to be, over these next 6 weeks, many invitations offered. Some, oh, yes, Lord. And others, oh, Lord, surely you can't be inviting me to do that, or to face that, or to change that. Something easier? And the voice responds in great gentleness, oh no, not for the time, not for the time. Recently, I ran across the acronym VUCA, whose 4 letters stand for volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. These 4 words characterize, in fact, those 4 words come from our own government and the government's description of the world in which we inhabit. Let me read them again. Volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. These 4 words characterize the world we now inhabit. In our globalized world, we are standing in 3 feet of gasoline, terrified that someone will drop a match. My son and his wife, Michelle, from the Philippines, and our little grandson, Vinny, live in the most dangerous country in the world, Taiwan. Now, here's the question. So that's the reality of the situation. Here's the question. Is it possible to live a loving, stable, centered life after the pattern of Jesus in our volatile, unsteady, complex world? I argue yes. Through the wisdom and power of Christ, we learn to recenter our lives on Jesus' life and teaching through transformative practice, which will sometimes entail reading a book, but not always. Transformative practice. Jesus models in his humanity and divinity what he created us to be. Little Christ through the power of his Spirit. All right, we're going to have some time, some time for some questions, but I want to read the pause and reflect questions. All right? Hopefully you'll find these helpful. Here are some reflection questions to start you on this journey. How would you describe the way you have been living your life up to this present day? How would you describe the way you have been living your life? What has defined or shaped your goals, your decisions, your choices? How you spend your time and resources? Was this way based on things you consciously decided, or based on things unconsciously inherited from others? You got to go slow with reflection questions. Has the way you've chosen to live, we have all chosen to live a certain way. Has the way you've chosen to live produced peace or pain? Flourishing or failure? Delight or disillusionment? Beauty or ugliness? Don't you love to look at a beautiful life? Is your current way in sync with how you think you should live? Why have you chosen to continue to live this way? It's a gift of years. They go by quickly. Are other alternatives available that you haven't considered adequately? Of course, I'm going to argue yes. What is the outcome of the path you are on? Are you unwittingly traveling on a dead-end street? Now, with these reflection questions, not every one of those is going to be applicable to you. Maybe 1 out of 6 or 7. But when I was reading through those, here's the key. When I was reading through those, did one go, oh, that's me? Just put a check by it, or a little asterisk by it. And don't run screaming into the night when you've discovered that this might be indeed a question you need to ponder. The Lord's response at that point is, oh, dear child, my precious image bearer, I've known that for a long time. We will work through that together. That's what it means to walk on a different way with Jesus. He reaches out his hand to us and says, latch on, and we're going to walk together and learn to live differently. Learn to live differently so that when our kids look at us, or our friends look at us, or our enemies look at us, at least if there's problems, they can't argue extensively about the way we're living. That's by God's grace, the goal. Well, we got 10 minutes or so. That's the beginning of the book. That's kind of an intro to the book. Now, was there something, for example, was there something that I said that resonated with you, or a question that you sense, oh, well, what about, or something, yeah, or what about? Fire away. We got, Phil said we got till
Yeah,
We
if you
got-
have a
We got
question,
13 minutes.
please speak it into the mic, and Rick's going to take over.
Yeah, we're going to record the questions.
It's not a question, but it's an observation about Dorothy Hall. She lived a beautiful life, and she comes to mind when you talk about that.
Well, I appreciate that. My mom is now in heaven by God's grace. One of the things that people will learn, not too many folks, but will learn that she was a much more troubled soul than met the eye. And people in the family knew this. So to be honest, I think she'd want me to tell the truth. To be honest, sometimes it was my mother's words. I would never say this while she was still alive. She's fine with this now. She's fine with this. But it was sometimes my mother's words or actions that actually pushed people in the family away from God. No, that's okay, because we're all like that. We'll have a perception of what a person must be like because we can learn the language and we can project something, there was some congruence between my mom's words and actions in her life. But she had a terribly difficult childhood, possibility of abuse in all kinds of ways, accidents, other family members engaging with her. It's just she had a rough life. And so what she managed to a certain extent take her gift of years and fit God into it in a way that was for her, aided her in ability to live well. To a given point. And now if she was sitting here, I tell you, she'd be smiling and she goes, yes. 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 That's fine. Rob Lodge. Are you over here? Rich?
I've got a big voice, so I don't...
Oh, well, we got to get on tape, I guess.
So, what are the personal marks that you can identify with that would give you confidence that you're actually moving down the different way?
Okay, yeah. What are the marks? What are the marks that someone's moving down a different way well? Well, this is going to be a broad generality, but I think it's true. Love. Love. It's not so we can do anything else but love God and love our neighbor well. So that would be the broad general statement. I tell this story in the book. When I went to a little unaccredited Jesus Freak Bible school, just off the campus of UCLA when I was getting ready to go to law school and everything changed in my life. And I went to this little Bible school. Not only, one of the teachers at the school actually said in front of the entire school, well, we all know Chris can't love. I still remember that. But you know what? It was true. And I'm smiling now because I started to learn to walk with Jesus. Oh boy, it took a long time. I started to learn to walk with Jesus, and maybe 5 years went past, and one of the young women in the school who knew me in the days where I couldn't love. I mean, there was a lot of stuff like this in my life. I just couldn't love. For any number of reasons. And then we were having a cup of coffee together. She hadn't seen me for a while. And she said, "You've changed." And I somewhat skeptically responded, "Yeah? How?" you can love. I still remember that conversation. You can love. So Rob, that's the marker. Now we manifest love in lots of different ways. Some of us are more emotive. Some of us are less emotive. We show love through our actions. I wonder, Josh, I think Josh is going to come to this class. I wonder what Josh would say, my youngest son, about how dad loves. Or my other kids. But they would have something to say. Anyway, love. It's the heart of the matter.
Well, that's a perfect segue into what I was going to say earlier, piggybacking on Mary's comment. I think our biggest critics are our children. And I just want to say about your mom, because I used to meet with her weekly to pray, and she prayed so much for you, and she loved you so much. So I just want to put that as the exclamation point on everything that was said, because I think, just want to honor her.
Yeah. Well, I would never even brought any of that up, but I got, truth always gets us to a good place. And that's a good word from you. I would never want to dishonor her in any way. But when you live with somebody, 24 hours a day, it's a little different.
You talked about how you were so engulfed in darkness, and then somehow the light broke through. I just wondered if you remember maybe a first instance or a happening in which you decided to turn and follow Jesus.
Yeah, was there a first time when the light bulb came on? I think it was more like this. A light bulb light comes on, and then there's. I think it was more like that. I think it was more like that, where God gave me, and perhaps God has given all of us. God gave me mentors who hung with me. I write about one of them with a certain situation in the book. Mentors who hung with me. And for me, friends. The role of friends in spiritual formation is absolutely key. Absolutely key. Because spiritual formation is deeply relational. You can't do this by sitting in your study. It's deeply relational. And so God provided me with pals at UCLA. I tell a story that I think is in chapter 1, where they actually probably saved my life because of the direction I was heading, because of a divorce that had occurred within the family. They saved my life, friends. And they're still with me 50 or 60 years later, those of them who are still alive. So for me, I think this is what actually conversion is. Sometimes we'll think of, well, conversion takes place, boom, then we're converted. Well, that paradigm is fine. I tend to think of, as I'm living my life, I tend to think of conversion as something, sometimes I'll say in my prayers, loony as it might sound, Lord, I need to get saved. I want you to go deep. You ever feel like that? I want you to go deep. I want you to go into those recesses in me that are still broken or wounded or untouched in some way by you. So I think that, could I point to one point in time? Well, I remember back in those days, I was told, well, what you do to get saved is you pray the prayer. Okay, I must have prayed that prayer 50,000 times. And that's good. It's the beginning. I'm praying for crying out loud. But I sense, it's almost like the Lord was saying to me, well, son, we got some work to do. Protestant folks will call this sanctification. We come into the kingdom, baptized, process of sanctification. Others will talk about a process of just ever deeper conversion. So let me ask you a question. What are the unconverted parts of you in the sense that I'm describing?
Hard to look at.
Yeah, sure, it's hard to look at, but that's why we don't start with the hard questions. We start with the reality that you and I are God's precious image bearer. Precious. When God looks at us, I don't care what the story of your life is, when God looks at us, he's not scowling. He's smiling. Because God is infinite. That means boundless. There are no boundaries to God's love. It's not as though God will say, well, you know, you've asked one too many times. It's not as though God will say, you know, frankly, I'm tired of this. You ever feel like that? I'm tired of this. I'm tired of you. Get it fixed up and come back and we'll have a talk. That's not what God is like. That's why next week we'll talk about, I think the chapter title is, the chapter title is, Get Rid of Your Dysfunctional, Destructive Views of God. And we learn them from lots of different people.